Good morning, everybody. I came here today to tell you my story and also tell you something honest and truth. And that is that global solidarity can really save lives. And I'm saying this not just because it sounds good or it's a good idea. It's because I live it. I live it back in Venezuela a few years ago. But before I start, I want to ask you, all of you, to do an exercise with me. Are we ready? I want all of you to close your eyes, just for a few seconds. Close your eyes and imagine that right now you are sleeping in your bed. Inhale, exhale, you're relaxed, and then you're starting to notice that there is a light above you that is bothering you. But you continue to sleep, and then you hear loud voices, strange noises, and someone starts to scream in the background. So you continue to sleep, and then you're starting to feel a horrible smell, and that's when it hits you, and you open your eyes. Open your eyes. You're not in your room, you're in a tiny cell made for 3 people, but now you're surrounded by 11 others, everybody laid on the floor. The guards enter to the cell and scream at you and mock at you and treat you like if you were a criminal. But you are not. You're a human rights defender. But now you're being treated like a criminal and like a political prisoner. You don't know what is going to happen with you. Some of your mates have been there for the last 10 days, and others have been there for the last 10 years. And this, my friend, this is how I woke up the 8th of May of 2014. When I woke up in a cell in a place called El Helicoide, the biggest torture center of Latin America. It's a prison made only for political prisoners, for people who dissent in Venezuela. So you might ask how a human rights activist end up in a prison like this. So let's start with the beginning. As you know, I'm from Venezuela. And I know it's hard to imagine, but in the 60s, Venezuela was one of the strongest democracies in the whole continent. Actually, we were one of the richest nations in South America because Venezuela has the biggest reserve of oil in the world. But in the 80s and the 90s, the inflation started to skyrocket, also corruption, and that paved the way for a new authoritarian leader, a very charismatic military, known as Hugo Chávez. Hugo Chávez, at the beginning of the decade, in the 90s, he did 2 coups d'etat, and he killed more than 100 innocent Venezuelans. He went to jail, but for reasons that I will never understand, they pardoned him. They allowed him not only to be free, but also to run for the next presidential election. And what happened? Chávez won. Chávez, he lasted from 1999 until his death in 2013. At the beginning, he started to nationalize the key economical industries in order to create a socialist republic. And he went after all the human rights and went against all the institutions. And that weakened all the democracy that we had. And also, those laws gave him so much power to him and to his peers that all of them are starting to get richer and richer, and the country poorer and poorer. That created an economical collapse. And at the beginning, not many people started to protest. But one important person in my life protested from the very beginning, and it was my grandmother. I'm that little guy over there, and there she is. And exactly 24 years ago, exactly this month, my grandma called me one day and said, "Hey, Rodrigo, I went to a protest and they throw tear gas and rubber bullets at me. We need to do something or we're gonna lose our country." So I said, "Don't worry, Grandma." I was 18 at the time. I was kind of your age. And I said, "I'm going with you next time. I'm gonna protect you." So I went to the protest the next time, and I was surprised because I fall in love for the first time of fighting for something bigger than myself. I also saw the horror of seeing how militaries were attacking very old people with tear gas and rubber bullets. And I saw that the country was in danger. So I continued protesting for the next 6 months. And I have to be honest, those protests were very exciting, a very exciting thing to do. It was like, I was young, I was like risking my life for my country. They were full of adrenaline. I never thought I was going to get killed or anything. Until one day, 6 months later, I started. On April 11, 2002, I was in the middle of the protest. We were more than 1 million people in front of the presidential palace, asking Chávez to resign. And then I hear some shots, and a man on my left gets shot in the leg. So I help him and carry him out to a safer place. And when I look back, I saw a man just laid on the floor, dead, at the exactly place where I was. Exactly the same place where I was just a few seconds before. And I said to myself, it could have been me. It could have been me. It could have been me. And I understood that moment that my life was a luxury, and how fragile life is, and the price that you have to pay to defend your country. And since that day, I decided to honor that person, or at least to fight until we recover our democracy. And that's what I've been doing all these years. After that horrible experience, I knew that I needed to pass from protesting to organizing. So I needed new tools, and I studied nonviolence. So I started to study Martin Luther King, Mandela, Gandhi, of course, and all the nonviolent leaders of our recent history. And one of my favorite movements was Otpor, a student movement who fought against Milosevic, a horrible dictator in the Balkans, in Serbia. And they find a way how to recover the democracy thanks to their power of mobilization and nonviolence. So I said, if they could do it, we can do it too. So I started to organize a student network all around the country. We started to do nonviolent and symbolic actions to send a strong message to the people that we were here to fight back for their democracy, that we're not going to allow the dictatorship to establish. And to be honest, at the beginning, we were 1,000, maybe 100 people. Not too many people were on the streets because, students were studying at their classes. They were not paying too much attention of what was happening in the country. Until 5 years later, when the Chávez decided to close the oldest TV station, we called all these students to go to the streets again. But this time we were not dozens, we were not hundreds, we were 200,000 students. Imagine, I just remember seeing the whole street full of young people protesting for their country. And I cried those days because we worked for 5 years to arrive to that point when finally the students knew the power that they have. And this was so powerful that we got like 70% of the support of the population. We even won that year. There was a referendum that year, and the only election that Chávez lost in his life, it was thanks to that movement. But after all of this, the regime was still in power, and I graduated. So I was not a student anymore. And I needed to continue protesting and fighting for my country. And then that's when I decided to create an international organization called A World Without Censorship. That is basically a network of activists all around the world based on the concept of global solidarity, that anyone, anywhere around the world can protest for the freedom in Venezuela or any other country. And also, of course, we mobilize artists, and we started to do concerts and murals and photography exhibition and anything that we could do to express what was happening in Venezuela. And this platform was also very important because in 2013, Chávez died and passed the power to Nicolás Maduro, a very less charismatic guy. He was not as charismatic as Chávez. He was not as powerful as Chávez. So the only tool that he had to control the population was through repression. So in 2014, when the protests started again, after just 1 month, more than 30 people were killed and more than 1,000 students were detained. So we knew that we needed to do something to raise awareness, to put more pressure on the regime, because they don't care about our opinion in our own country, but they care of what other people think about around the world. So we call our activists to do a protest called SOS Venezuela. And through social media, we start to organize events in cities around the world to spell the word SOS with their bodies. I was surprised when first we have 5 cities confirmed, then 10, then 20, 90, even 120 cities participate in these world protests at the same time. And the power of that is that all these protests were captured the attention of the media. And we talked what was happening in Venezuela. And it was so powerful because it happened from Dubai to Madrid to Paris to London to anywhere, like imagine all the cities where are democracies, they were protesting for us. And this helped to stop the killing. This action make the regime to reflect and stop the killing. Actually, global solidarity, what I call, helped to save lives in Venezuela. And this is a power that we all have around the world. And this protest was so successful, that, of course, it had a high price for us. So a few months later, the regime went after us. They knew they needed to stop us. So they raided our office. They stole our equipment. They went to my office, then to my home. And then when I tried to leave the country, they captured me at the airport. And that's how I end up in this horrible prison called El Helicoide. But again, thanks to global solidarity, all these activists around the world are starting to raise their voice, asking for my liberation. And I was the only one to leave that prison that year, because I was the only one who had an international network of solidarity that raised their voice for my freedom. So not only it helped global solidarity to save life, but also to save my life. And when I was free, they took my passports. They prohibited me to leave the country. So I decided to continue protesting from Venezuela. And 1 year after, when I was arriving home after a protest, there was a car waiting for me near my home, and they intercept me, and they kidnapped me. So I said, this is happening again. First the prison, now this. They put me in a car, and with a gun in my head and my stomach for 4 hours, they were driving me all around the city, threatening me. And I didn't know if this time I was going to survive. I didn't want to be this, human rights activist who got killed by the regime. So I started to pray, and I promised God that if I survived, I was going to plan my escape. And I even remember vomiting myself inside the car because I was terrified of losing my life. And when they released me in a desert street in the middle of Caracas, I decided to plan my escape, and that's what I did. 2 months after, I crossed the border from Venezuela to Colombia without passport, with the help of my girlfriend at the time, who sacrificed also her life to help me to cross the border. And then we spent a week in a refugee camp in Colombia. And then we arrived to Bogota, and arrived later to the US when I was finally free and safe. And I've been fighting since then from this incredible country. And I'm here to tell you that I'm the lucky guy of this whole story. I'm the exception of the norm. The norm of Venezuela is that you're going to spend 4 years in a prison. I know people who have been 20 years detained in a prison just because they dissent, and the regime have stolen their lives. And not only that, these 4 men are just a few of the Venezuelans who have been killed inside captivity. Their name: Fernando Albán, Raúl Baduel, Rodolfo González, and Captain Acosta Arevalo are just one of the few who their lives were ripped away from their families just because they dissent against a regime that doesn't tolerate dissent. And they're like a wound to all of us. But not only that, let's talk about this guy over here, Jesus Armas. He's a good friend of mine, one of my best friends. Actually, he started in politics with me. And we together found the student movement of Venezuela. But for the last 300 days, he has been in a horrible prison. He also had been tortured. He had been tied to a chair and suffocated with a plastic bag. Jesus shouldn't be in that cell. He should be at Stanford right now where he was already admitted, and he could never go there because he's spending his days in a horrible prison, the same prison that it was 10 years ago. So I want all of you to understand the power that you all have to help people like Jesus, to help political prisoners, not only in Venezuela, but it can be in Cuba, in Nicaragua, in Gaza, anywhere around the world. Because sometimes this regime cares more about what other people think outside their countries than inside their countries. And right now, I want to ask all of you to do something. I want all of you to use your cell phone and take a picture of that QR code so you can sign a petition for the liberation of Jesus Armas and all the political prisoners in Venezuela. Because when you're doing that, you're helping all the political prisoners around the world, because you are reminding that political prisons can only happen when we fail to defend our democracy. And we all have to defend our democracy before it's too late. So I want all of you to think that maybe next year, Jesus is going to be here giving a speech thanking students just like you that raise their voices for his liberation, that he is going to be free thanks to global solidarity, that Venezuela, I'm sure, one day will be free thanks to the support of people who care of what is happening in Venezuela, and the same in Cuba, Nicaragua, or any dictatorship around the world. And for the last time, I want all of you to do our last exercise. I want all of you, for the last time, to close your eyes again, please. And close your eyes and think this time you're a political prisoner in Venezuela, inside that horrible place. And it's early in the morning and you don't want to wake up. You don't want to wake up because you know there is a horrible day awaiting for you. And maybe you will be tortured. So you don't want to open your eyes, but then a strong noise wakes you up and you open your eyes. And that's when it hits you. You're not in a cell. You're in a room at home. You are free and safe. Thanks that students at Rowan University and many other places raised their voices for you. And now you're free at home and safe thanks to global solidarity. Thank you very much. And please, don't forget to sign up the petition for the liberation of Jesus. It's very important for us.